this video, I just want to talk briefly about what generative AI is and how we can use it to learn without just accepting everything it says. So the first thing I want to address is what is generative AI and how is it different from other technologies? Because the first thing you need to know about AI is that it's kind of a new thing. It generates stuff instead of calculates stuff. So, for example, if I use a calculator and I put in 2 plus 2, I can expect every single time it'll give me 4. It's actually calculating that. It's following code, an algorithm in a code that shows how to do the math formula and gives the response. When I use generative AI, for example, I'm going to focus on what we call large language models, which are like ChatGPT that use words. It's not calculating something. It has an algorithm that it has code behind it. But within that algorithm is some randomness. And it's also so complex that humans, we can't really understand. We can't look at the algorithm and everything and then understand it fully. It does stuff we don't expect. So that's why it's called generative. And that's why it requires different thinking than we really use in our normal everyday lives and with other tools. So the tricky thing about this is that it's designed to feel like another human, right? It's built on human language. And so it's really easy to make assumptions about what it tells you. We're used to when we talk to a person or we look something up, we're used to that having at least some foundation in truth. In this case, there's no truth foundation. It doesn't know whether it's true or not because it's just based on words and things that go together, words or images or other things that constantly go together in the language, which may or may not be true. The amazing thing is how often it is right. But because it's right so much, it makes it hard when it's not. It's hard to remember that. Really, it's just a whole bunch of computer servers that have a whole bunch of data trained on them that put things together that go together in human representations. It's not a search engine. So unless you see it actually saying it's searching the internet or it gives you a link to a website, it's not looking something up on the website to give you the answer. There are exceptions. They're starting to go search more, but the default mode, what these models actually are, is not looking it up on the internet. That's kind of an add-on that the programmers can add to it to have it have that ability. But you can't assume it's doing that. It's not a truth machine. It doesn't know what the truth is, and it's not an oracle. Okay, so what is it? Humans, if we think about how humans think and learn, we experience the world around us. We use our sense systems, we use our thinking, how pieces go together, and we create kind of internal representations. These representations then we put out into external representations, and it all links together and goes back and forth. But just the most simplest way is I could write stuff, write words, I could draw pictures, and those pictures have some foundation in my actual experience in thinking. Okay? I put that stuff, those representations, those end up on the internet, at least some of them. And some people's representations, some people have more of their representations on the internet than others, and that causes an equity issue to remember. What these, for example, large language models do, and that's what that says, large language models, is they look at the patterns in these representations and then they repeat them to some extent. It doesn't know whether or not it's based on reality. It's just repeating patterns. Okay, so what that means is, let me give you an example first. Sorry, wrong way. This is my great niece, Nora. She's 3.5. And we were hiking in Bryce Canyon in Utah. Very pretty. And we were somewhere, I think we were somewhere around here. I don't know. And Nora was riding in a backpack with her dad. And I looked at the trail and we had a fork. We had to decide which way to go. And I didn't know what our plans were. So I was like, which way should I go? And Nora says, Melissa, you need to go left, then right, then left, then right. I read the map. Okay. Now, of course, I knew she didn't read the map. So that was very cute and funny. She wasn't lying, she was just putting words together. However, I did wonder, it seemed like maybe she knew what left and right were if she's using those words. And so I asked her, Dad, does, does Nora know what left and right are? And his response is, well, she has a lot in common with ChatGPT. Nora has heard these words go together. She has been hiking in her dad's backpack or with her mom, and she's heard them talk about a map. She's heard the words left and right that go with the map. But that doesn't not mean that she read the map. In fact, it doesn't even mean like my original thought that she knows what left and right are. It's so easy to assume that she must know those words, but it doesn't mean that she knows those words. Okay? I have to use my own experience to judge, and of course, I'm not going to follow what she says. It's clear, but it might not always be clear with a large language model. And that's basically what large language models do. Nora doesn't have the actual experience of reading a map. She doesn't even really have the experience of hiking and having to decide where to go. She's almost always in someone's backpack. So that's what large language models do. They're sometimes called a sophisticated stochastic parrot. And stochastic has to do with statistics and randomness and such, that it kind of puts together and parrots back stuff. But it doesn't mean that it actually knows that stuff. So given that context, how do we use this for learning? Because if it's not going to tell us the truth necessarily, should we be trusting it? Let me show you that one thing that I'm doing with my students just to try this out. We have a reading by Hashemi that's kind of a complicated reading that uses a lot of vocabulary that's different than what other disciplinary vocabulary I commonly use with my students. I didn't want to just teach my students this material because I don't want them to accept what anyone says, not ChatGPT, but also just other people. I want them to have their brains engaged. So what I did is I gave them these instructions. I said, we're going to go, you can choose most free LLMs, free versions, ChatGPT, CoPilot, Claude. Most of them let you upload files now. So I'm going to take, this is the PDF of the article we're reading. I'm going to update that. And I used my own disciplinary knowledge and my own pedagogical knowledge to write a prompt about what I wanted it to do. So I gave it a role and kind of a purpose. Why am I asking you to do this? And so I want it to provide an overview of the paper because I think it's important for them to get some context. I want it to look at the specialized vocabulary. I know certain words that my students may or may not know what they mean, or they may know what they mean in one context, but not necessarily the context of this article. And so I asked it to explain that. And then there's three things I want them to focus on with this article. I'm not just reading it for anything. I want it to put forth certain points I want them to think about. So I asked it in its overview to highlight these points. I also said, provide an overview and please use examples, this should say from the article, examples from the article itself, and the purpose again. So what I'm having my students do is I'm having them copy it in here. Now I could create my own chatbot for this pretty easily, but I want them to be seeing the prompt and thinking about how it works so they can do this on their own in the future. So I'm going to run it and it's going to give us the stuff. Now I'm emphasizing with my students through this video actually that they need to be thinking about this stuff not as fact, but as content to think with, some ideas to put in their brain to deal with before they start reading the whole thing. And then we're going to keep our brains on, and when we're reading the whole thing, we're going to evaluate, what lines up and what doesn't. But this gives us a little bit of a framework to build on while we're reading and going through this. And we're going to read it on a tool called Perusall, where we're going to ask questions with each other and support throughout that process, because we also want to be communicating with humans. So that's kind of what I'm trying. I'm also encouraging them as they read, if they're confused, you can ask more questions. You can, try to do to more stuff, but I'm using my pedagogical knowledge and disciplinary knowledge, my content knowledge, to create a prompt that can provide some scaffolding for my students with the hope that they can still be pretty independent on when they're reading. So I hope it works, and let me know what you think.